This is Keep the Faith Ministry News. I'm Hal Mayer. When the United States pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, it created some interesting consequences. Berlin, for instance, is trying to use Washington's withdrawal to increase its own pressure on Iran to make further concessions by demanding that the Iranian government limit its ballistic missile program and its efforts to obtain influence in the region. The reintroduction of U.S. sanctions offers Berlin a chance to disguise its continued pressure on Tehran as a war preventive measure. Washington's policy could provoke a war against Iran in the near future. By pulling out of the deal, the United States also gives Tehran an excuse to continue its nuclear program. This in turn would give the United States the excuse it needs to launch attacks on Iran. An Iranian nuclear bomb would immediately limit U.S. freedom of action in the Middle East, wrote Matthew Kronig, a U.S. military expert on Iran. Washington would have to think twice before acting in this region. This would be unacceptable and must be prevented, if necessary, with a war. At the same time, U.S. sanctions against Iran continue to fuel the power struggle between the EU and the USA. Many German companies will suffer billions in losses by U.S. sanctions. Airbus, for instance, will have to cancel its 16 billion euro deal with Iran, and many other German companies will have to do the same. Berlin is hoping that under the pressure of U.S. sanctions against Iran and Israeli action in Syria, Tehran can be blackmailed into making desired concessions to Berlin, London, and Paris. Iran's regional influence is partly a result of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, which resulted in a Shiite majority in Baghdad's government, which Iran heavily influences. Meanwhile, the war in Syria, which was started by the U.S. and Germany, has resulted in an Iranian military presence in Syria, again increasing Iran's influence in regional affairs. Thirdly, when the Saudis' U.S.-supported war in Yemen was launched, it drove the Houthis into Iran's embrace. Now, Germany wants to limit that influence. Berlin is confronting awkward decisions in relationship to Washington. With the threat of punitive tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, the Trump administration has already put the German government under heavy pressure. The U.S.'s most recent sanctions, single-handedly imposed on Russia, are also threatening to cause serious damage to German companies. All of it is costing the German industry additional billions in losses. German industry will mostly comply with the sanctions because their business activity in the USA is many times greater than that with Iran and cannot be jeopardized. However, these new sanctions are also an element in the power struggle between Germany and the USA. Recently, Berlin had repeatedly reiterated that it intends to rise in global politics and operate on equal terms with Washington. Trump is countering this, among other things, with an aggressive trade policy and currently also against Germany's trade with Iran. The U.S. ambassador to Berlin demanded via Twitter that German industry phase out immediately their business relations in Iran, outraging Berlin. The German government finds itself in an awkward position. It faces the alternative of subordinating itself to the United States or risking serious losses on its most important sales market and its by far most important investment location, the USA. The Germans will have to conclude that it is better to comply with U.S. demands and prevent Iran's nuclear arming than to stop a war. This would restore cohesion between the U.S. and Germany. The Bible is more relevant than ever. When Jesus said that the nations would be distressed and would go to war with each other in the last days, it is easy to see that he knew what he was talking about. And there shall be upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, Luke 21:25. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, Matthew 24, verse 7. This is Keep the Faith Ministry News. Thank you for watching.